Very good. So we're going to go through 10% of our brains know, we use 100% of our brains all the time. We do. Left and right brain processing, so you're absolutely right, we use both of them, correct. Left is a little bit more focused, and right is a little bit more gestalt. So I suppose if you think about music, left is used for the notes, and right is used for the whole thing. Put it all together. If you think about a pigeon, left is used to find the seeds, and right is used to spot whether or not the cat's going to get it. So we do have a little bit of a difference between them, but we have to use both sides. And learning styles, no, we don't have a preferred learning style. We have what we think is a good learning style, but actually we need all of the learning styles together collectively to make things work. Right, you can use your brains again now. All I want you to do is to stare for about 15 seconds at the spot on that on the nose. I think you can see there's two eyes in the nose on that, so just stare for about 15 seconds. Don't blink, try not to blink, try not to blink, try not to blink. Keep staring, keep staring, keep staring. And then look across to the right. Oh. See, I said, oh no. Oh, doing very nice, huh? Monica Lewinsky. Oh my God, we didn't recognise the brains. Oh, that's coming up. Very good. We're just getting the brain ticking over a little bit. It's probably not quite a big enough audience yet, but do you know the colour? Gold and white. So we go gold and white. Any gold and white tables? We've got Sarah, we've got David, we've got Nettie. Gold and white, absolutely brilliant. How confident are you, David, that it's gold and white? How confident?
I'm 100% confident.
Yeah, you bet your mortgage on it. That lovely house of yours in Kent, would you? It's definitely gold and white. Is it gold and white?
Gold and white.
It's gold and white.
No, it's not.
Oh, really? Really? Apparently it's blue and black. David, it's blue and black. Is it blue and black? Blue and black. Definitely blue and black. Blue and black. So, you probably know the story. The story behind this one was a daughter sent an image of the dress that she was going to wear to a wedding to her mum, and her mum texted back and said, "You can't upstage the bride, you can't be wearing white and gold at a wedding." The daughter texted back and said, "Don't listen to your mum, it's blue and black." So I'm really sorry. You're wrong, I'm wrong, you're wrong. This is now blue and black. I think everyone sees this as blue and black. The point is, I suppose, is that the brain does play tricks on us. Your reality and my reality can be considerably different. So different that I would literally bet my house that is gold and white, and others would completely disagree. Okay, so you're all done. Very good. Right, so let's take you back. So Phineas Gage, this was Phineas Gage. That was Phineas Gage, 1858, United States of America, East Coast. He was the person who was responsible for laying down the railroads, but he was the explosives expert. And so he would be blasting away at the rock. To do that, he'd have to drill into the rock, put the gunpowder into the rock, and then use a tapering iron to really compact it. And then he would take the rock away, and then he would blow up the rock and move the rock. Phineas Gage used a wooden ladder on a metal tapering iron. Except on one occasion he did. He picked up a metal hammer and metal tapering iron, spark, down bent, and the tapering iron went up through this part of his head and through the top. The amazing thing, once the dust had settled and all his friends had come over and realised that he was clearly dead, is that he sat up vampire-like and shook his head a little bit, just to say, well, it hurt. And it definitely hurt here, because it went up through here, and it definitely hurt here, because it came out from here, but it didn't hurt inside. And we sort of know now that it doesn't really hurt inside because we don't have any sensors in our brain. Weirdly, you can actually take the skull off, cut the skull out, open up the brain, and you can fiddle around with the brain. You can probably take your teaspoon and start mixing it. And you wouldn't be able to feel that we were doing it. Your responses and your language and your jerks, etc., would mean that from an observer's point of view, you know that somebody was messing around with your brain, but there's no pain receptor in the brain. Okay, so Phineas actually was okay. They called the snake out, they stitched it up on both sides, sent him off. He was a happily married man. 10 years later, he died on the other side of the United States of America, in San Francisco, a broken man. He lost the ability to understand social norms, and so if he felt somebody was threatening, he punched them first. He thoroughly enjoyed alcohol, he didn't know when to stop it. He thoroughly enjoyed drugs, he didn't know when to stop them. If he felt somebody was ugly, he'd tell them they were ugly. not understanding. But what had happened is that Phineas Gage had the whole of his frontal lobe, we'll talk about frontal lobe briefly in a minute, frontal lobe blown out, literally been smashed. So he has no understanding or awareness of social norms. He lost that ability. He had no way of controlling his desires. He didn't have that ability to put a brake on what he wanted to do. And so he died a broken man. His children wanted to talk to him, his wife obviously forced it. So I suppose he was the first proper case study in this wonderful idea of neuroscience, cognitive psychology, etc. The other one was Henry, HM. He was always known as Henry until he passed away about 2008. Henry's story was a little bit different. We're now 1958, again on the East Coast of the United States of America. And Henry had a bicycle for his 30th birthday. He had an accident on his bicycle on his 40th or 50th birthday, where he fell off and he hit his head. And from that moment, he developed horrible schizophrenia. He didn't develop schizophrenia at all. He developed a horrible epilepsy, serious epilepsy. Now, I don't know if anyone's seen an epileptic fit, but I've seen a few in school, and they're not very pleasant. But they usually last for about 30 seconds, the really serious ones with the shaking, etc. His used to last for up to a minute and a half. The nice good thing is that when he was about 23, he fell in love. Wonderful, with a lovely person. Fantastic. They chose to get married. But she said to him, I really love you, but the old epilepsy thing we'll have to try and resolve. So they agreed that they would try and resolve the epilepsy. We're in 1958 now. They were able to put on the EEGs, the electrograms, onto the head, the scalp, and they could find out where the increase in electricity was coming from, electrical impulses was coming from. And it turned out it was coming from deep inside the brain into what we know as the hippocampus. Those of you that are experts on the brain probably know. This is looking up here. So you've got the brain stem here. This goes down to the spinal cord. This is the base of the brain. And that side, you have two things called hippocampi. And hippocampi, nobody really knew what they were for until HM. So the doctors realised that the epilepsy was stemming from those two parts of the brain, and so they removed them. It was a pretty straightforward operation, actually. Just went up through here and they removed both of the hippocampi. And he recovered. He had no epilepsy at all afterwards. Wonderful story. His wife had to divorce him about 50 years later because he would wake up in the morning and say, "Who are you? Get out of my bed, you stranger." The hippocampus, it turns out, is the thing in your brains that allows you to take short-term memories and turn them into long-term. So the moment they let him out, he was not able to develop any new long-term memories. He was perfectly capable of saying loads of stuff about the history up to his 23rd birthday when he had the operation. But after that, he had no memory whatsoever. So if you met him, you shook hands with him, you were introduced to him, he would say hi. His memory would last for about 30, I think a minute and a half, and then you'd have to repeat it. So why did his wife divorce him? Well, he married a person who was 23 years old. She was now 75. Every time he looked at her, he didn't know who the hell he was lying next to. Every time he woke up, he was waking up to a stranger. You know, her face was a bit saggy, she had red hair, etc., etc. Really strange idea that the brain is not able to keep up with the changes in time, who this person is. He is probably, that brain is probably the most studied brain. That is actually his brain. It's in the Scripps Institute in San Diego in California. The brain that is probably more well known is Einstein's brain, and you can still buy slices of Einstein's brain. They're still selling slices of Einstein's brain. But his is probably the most studied. So of all of the sort of important people, I suppose, within this science of memory and memory acquisition, HM, through no fault of his own, has become a very important case study, very important. Right, anyway, little test. David, yellow. What is it? Frontal lobe, very good. Thinking, planning, executive function, etc., etc. Very important. It's the bit that means that you don't interrupt me when we're talking. I'm talking. You sit there quietly listening, you understand social norms and social graces, etc. Hello. I thought you were called young for a second. This one, green. Parietal, very good. A bit more difficult to remember because it's a new word, probably a word you've not really come across. Parietal, maybe. Parietal, this part of the brain, very important. Somatosensory, touch, that sort of thing in particular, very close to the motor coordination. Just here, 3 and 4, this is motor coordination, your ability to move, and this is touch, your ability to sense stuff. I just sense okay, we're going to go, no, you second yours off. Joe, what's this one? Temporal, very good. Well, you can say temporal, I can tell. Language, very important here, especially the Broca's area, which happens to be 44, but Welling's area here, which is the one that allows you to comprehend the word Joe, very impressive, and the ability to say the word Joe. But also, it's got the hippocampus in. This is the hippocampus in memory. And no surprise to many of you, memory and emotion very closely. Things that you like, you remember. Things that scare you, you remember. Things that you hate, you remember. Integral parts, and they're all part of this part of the brain. All part of this brain. And lastly, did we pick it in before? Tina. At the back of the brain here. Strange place to put it. Vision, occipital lobe. The vision is at the back here. Weird. If you were planning brain, you wouldn't really put vision here. It's just there. But no question, David?
Frontal lobe.
Frontal lobe to do with?
Social norms.
Very good, don't interrupt. You put the brake on. It's the bit that makes us different from most other animals. It's the bit that is seriously accentuated, I suppose, in humans. It's the bit that allows us to be polite. It's the bit that allows us to understand and take note of everything else that comes in and makes sense of it all. Central executive function, I suppose. Where did we go next? We went parietal. Well done. That's good. You practiced it. Did you know it? Parietal. So parietal was to do with. Yeah, very good. Touch and very close to motor, the movement. Well done. Very good, Joe. You know what's on? Temporal. There you go. Yeah. And to do with memory. Excellent. And language. And more importantly, emotion. You feel a little bit emotional now? Temporal lobes there. Great. Lastly, we went to Tina. And we're going
to something.
Occipital. Very good. No pressure. Occipital. It's like being back in school. It's an annoying teacher that's gone here to teach you. Occipital lobe. Vision. Good. The things that you need to remember if you're concerned about teenagers is this and this. So this and this. This is the left side here. This is the front here. This is the back here. And this is temporal here. Left hemisphere. Is that okay? Right. MRI scans. That's how we know a bit about the brain. We put people in MRI scans, we get them to read, we get them to laugh, we get them to hate, we get them to laugh, we get them to sing songs, we get them to do stuff. And once they go in the MRI scan, we come out with these fMRI images, functional MRI images. And these functional MRI images, you're probably familiar with them, they look sort of like this. This is where we get the idea that you only use 10% of your brain. You only use 10% of your brain because we see images like this and we think that only 10% is being used at any one time. This is just a clever computer program, and all it's measuring is the amount more of oxygen or blood going to a particular part of the brain when a particular activity is being undertaken. So all of the brain is being used, just the computer program is focused on those little bits, So we've got that A, we've got B, we've got C. This is most of you, I suspect, all of you, I suspect. B is unlikely to be you, but it's missing that bit, and C is just elevated the bits that are missing. So A, yes, this is a normal reader without dyslexia. This is somebody with dyslexia, so that part of the brain doesn't seem to be functioning as well as in a normal reader. And C, that's the area of significance. So we have this insight, we have this knowledge, this ability to look and see which bits of the brain are being affected at which points. Sort of quite important because I'm going to show you some other images in a minute. Right, well I think this is pretty obvious. Socrates was writing about teenagers. They've got bad manners, contemporary authority, they should disrespect their elder, love chattering, so no longer rise when their elders enter the room. They contradict their parents, they chatter away, they've got all their food and tyrannise their teachers. Socrates was writing that how many thousands of years ago. There was something about teenagers. Shakespeare, the greatest living playwright, there he is, 1623, used to sleep, rest, get in wenches, they run the ancient tree, they steal, they fight, they do all of those things. That's what teenagers do. And Hermann Hesse, the great German writer, he also makes that comment. So we're talking 3,000 years ago, we're talking 500 years ago, we're talking 200 years ago. There seems to be a thing about teenagers. Right, so this is okay with you. We've got 10 minutes on teenagers. Plasticity, grooming, circadian rhythms, and drugs. Favourite drug? Alright. Before we do, you have to know what your brain is made of. So your brain is basically made of these things. They're called neurons, they're cells. The neuron cell body is up here. They have things coming into them called dendrites. They have this axon terminal, this spine, this body that comes out, the stem that comes out, and the stem that comes out ends in these things called axon terminals. Axon terminals connect to the dendrites of another neuron, and another neuron, and another neuron, and another neuron. The impulse that comes down here is an electrical impulse. An electrical impulse that comes down here, travels down here very quickly, very quickly. And the neuron is surrounded by this thing called a myelin sheath. And a myelin sheath is white in colour. It's made of a particularly difficult to get hold of fat called omega-3. And the person that is really interested in looking at the difference between dyslexic readers and non-dyslexic readers is very interested in myelin sheath, and he's called John Stein. And his brother is Rick Stein. And Rick Stein loves omega-3 because he loves his fishy foods. He loves his fishy food. So there's a nice little link there. Anyway, you do need this. It acts like an insulator. It acts like sort of plastic that goes around your copper wire. And it makes it much more efficient. The reason we like drugs is because drugs are used to carry the impulse from one neuron, a place called synapse, which you might remember back in those heady days when you did biology. The impulse is carried from one side to another side through a cleft, through a gap by chemicals. That's why we like drugs. That's why we like Nurofen. That's why we like paracetamol. That's why we like alcohol. They partner and they allow this movement from one to another, or they block it. Nurofen is very good at stopping that movement. It doesn't allow a transition of electrical impulses from one to another. That's why it's good at keeping pain at bay. It doesn't allow the neurons to talk to each other. Okay, briefly, just mean that I'm going to. Kamika, is it Kamika? How many do you have in your brain? How many of these things, these neurons? A million? 2 million? 2.5 million? 10 million, really. Jim, we met. How many?
I have no idea.
Yes.
So I would say, I don't know.
It's hardly a problem.
30 million.
30 million. You have 86 billion.
Oh.
86,000 million. Next time somebody says you're going to be bursting your brain cells if you drink too much alcohol, you can all confidently say, take a few. I've got loads. Don't worry, I've got 86,000 of the damn things. 86,000 million of them. Those of you that are good at maths, and I won't put anybody on the spot, but if you are good at maths, you have about 5 to 15,000 of these things. And they all come out and they all connect to other ones. I don't know what your maths is like, but 86,000 million. Each of them has 5 to 15,000 potential connections. My word, your brain's a miracle. It is a miracle. Okay, so one of my favourite things is this is an image. It inspires me. This is learning. So you are all born with 86,000 million, give or take, neurons. There's one, there's one, there's one, there's one, there's one, there's one, there's one. That's sadly an image of the slice of a baby's brain, a newborn baby's brain. This is the 1 week old baby's brain. This is the 1 month old baby's brain. And this is the 6 month old baby's brain. That is the interesting thing I think about learning. What you do to learn is that you grow new connections. You physically grow new connections. You physically have to grow new connections. This is learning. This is education. This is what it really is like in your brains. And if you've now learned that the temporal, you came in with no connection, and now you just made one. You thought your brain was completely static, but actually it's doing stuff in there. It's going, oh, that was interesting. This bloke Jones is alright. He's not too intimidating, and I'm able to make any connection. How long it lasts for is entirely up to you. It's entirely. Okay, so that is the 6-month-old brain. What's interesting in the teenagers is that you probably are aware that a 10-year-old brain is the most capable of learning new things. It's the 10-year-old up to the age of 10. After the age of 10, and why St Andrews for me is so wonderful, is that the 14, 15, 16-year-old brain, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old brain, it starts to do something rather sad. It prunes away, like pruning your roses. It prunes away those connections that you no longer seem to use. You no longer seem to want to use. The bits and bobs that in your life don't seem to be relevant particularly. Maybe for teenagers physics, do you still read physics? Did you learn physics back in the day? Not even anything.
Not at all.
Okay, you're a bad example. I'm sure you did some physics back in the day. I'm sure there are certain things that you did do. What I worry about in education, what I love about the likes of St Andrews, is that you don't need to prune it away. It doesn't need to be pruned away. If it's being used, then the brain realises it's being used. You continue your physics, and it will maintain those connections. Those connections won't disappear. They will stay connected if they are being used. Sadly, in our education system, all too quickly, we start getting students to specialise. We don't encourage them to take risks. We don't encourage them to do what you guys are doing here. And so they prune away the bits, the connections that the brain no longer thinks is relevant. A little bit sad. So, importantly, for the 14-year-old teenagers, if you use them repeatedly, they stay together. Hens was a very good Canadian psychologist, and he came up with a nice way, a succinct way of putting it all together. He said neurons that fire together, they wire together. If you're practicing and you use them repeatedly, then the brain goes, well, this is clearly something I need to use. Let's keep it going, let's keep it going, let's just maintain it. Let's keep it. If you don't, then it gets pruned away, it gets removed. The connections get removed. I don't know whether or not if you come back and, do you know it? Testing, go, hey, temporal learning, on the way home. Always.
So, you use 14, but when you talk about much older people, like say in the 70s, is 14 a very key age, or is that
it is.
It
It is the important age. 14, 15, 16, 17. By 21, you pretty much decided what you're good at, and then you really just repeat what you're good at endlessly. You get very good at human resources, and you get very good at architecture. I wasn't going to use facilities management or anything like that. You get very good at those sorts of things because you use it, and that becomes your status symbol for one of the best. That gives you status within your peer group of these people.
And then when I'm 18,
you can still learn the piano, but it's incredibly difficult and very difficult to learn, and you need immense motivation to be able to do it. The brain is plastic all the way until you die, but it's much more plastic at the age of 3 up to 14. At the age of 14 to 16, 17, it gets more and more pruned because it realises that actually there are other more important things in life like sex and finding partners, and enjoying drugs and doing all those other risk-taking things, annoying your parents, doing those other things teenagers. Should we save the questions? Can you save that question to you? Okay, so the other thing that's quite important, and this is the bit about the temporal lobe family, what the brain also does from the age of 5 all the way through to 20 is it matures. And weirdly, biology is made it mature from the back to the front. So the last bit to mature, and you all guessed it, is the bit that allows for reason. It's the bit that allows people to assess risk. So I like skiing, and I go with my teenage sons, and we stand at the top of the black run, and when they were 16, they would stand at the top of the black run, and they would go, ha, I'm going to love this. I would stand at the top of the black run and go, ha, I'm going to die if I go down the street. It's going to kill me. They don't assess risk in the same way that you assess risk, but they do have the mature temporal lobe. And the mature temporal lobe is the memory and emotion. So they have the adult connection of emotion, and they rise to that emotion very quickly. They love people very quickly, they hate people very quickly, they're angry very quickly, they laugh very quickly, they totally get emotion because they have a very mature temporal lobe. But that combined with not a particularly mature frontal lobe gives you your classic teenager. And your classic teenager has literally got physically a different physiological build-up to you. So when you attempt to reason with them based on your logic, and they're listening to you and saying, yes, I promised never to do that again, and then you say, well, you did do it again 2 hours later, and they go, really very important, really very important. So the brain matures to this point, 20, 21, 22, 23, you all now have mature brains, and you are very good at doing the things that you happen to be very good at. Congratulations. Right, sleep is a bit of an issue. We don't have an awful lot of time, so let's get through them. Circadian rhythms, 24-hour cycles. There's something very weird about the teenage brain. We're going to ignore that, although please discourage your offspring or teenagers to use laptops, these things, because they produce this false light, this background light that makes you stimulated. And it limits this stuff. So the body produces melatonin, and it produces, for you guys, it produces melatonin around about 9:30. An hour later, you start to get tired, you nestle, you take Horlicks, you go upstairs, and if you've got enough time, you put yourself to bed. But about 10:30, you try and get to sleep by 8. Some quirk of nature has meant that teenagers don't do it at the same time as you. From the age of 14, 13, all the way through to about 21, they do it an hour later. Their melatonin doesn't kick in for an hour later. So when you're telling your teenage son or daughter to go to bed because they surely are tired, they're literally an hour out of kilter with you. So they're not tired. They physically are not tired. They're producing melatonin at a different stage to you. When you wake up at 7:30, all refreshed, having had your nice 7 hours of sleep, if you're lucky, and you yell at them and say, hurry up, we've got to get up to school, you're torturing them because you're waking them up at least an hour before their body wants to be woken up, because they've produced their melatonin later than yours, and therefore they're lagging behind you as well. Really important. Some schools are going down the starting year 11, year 12, year 13, sometimes even year 10 lessons a little bit earlier. About 41 states in the United States of America are doing something similar with their junior high and their high school students, starting them a little bit later because of the research here. Right, and the other thing that's important about sleep, I haven't told you about the fact that you've got other cells in your brain. It's freaky. So the other cells that you have in your brain, there are 4 of the types. They're called glial cells. And these glial cells are structured to the brain. They also produce the melanin that goes around the brain. It's not connected to the neuron, it's something separate. They produce that. But more weirdly, they're the ones that wander up and down and around your brain. They're doing it at the moment. They're doing it at the moment, looking for signs of weakness, looking for toxic levels that need to be removed, looking for toxins that are in there that shouldn't be in there, looking for cells that shouldn't be in there. They're moving around in your brain now. And the other thing they do at night time is that they go down to the end here where the neuron, the axon terminals are, and they're the ones that assess how important the memory is. And if they assess that the memory isn't strong enough, temporal lobe isn't strong enough, then they will cut it away. They do the pruning. They will do the pruning. You don't need to know what Jeremy Dudman Jones was wearing. You know now because you're looking at me. It's pointless you knowing what I was wearing tomorrow, or the next day, or the next day. Irrelevant nonsense. So your brain, your glial cells will walk up and down the ceiling going, well, you had this thing, there was a sentence, he was wearing pink, he had a pink face. I'm going to cut that memory away. It's not an important memory. It's not an important memory. Why do you need sleep? That's why you need sleep. You need sleep because these won't function unless you are in your dream sleep, your REM sleep, your rapid eye movement sleep. So if you don't get your rapid eye movement sleep, you won't be able to do all of that important pruning away, getting rid of the not particularly important memories. And you need the REM sleep, that deep sleep, when you sort of move around, but weirdly, deep sleep, to get rid of all the build-up of toxins. It's like, you've been running a marathon all day, you get tired, your brain's been working all day, it's tired. It is just a biological cycle. It produces waste products. Those waste products have to be got rid of, rather like when you run a marathon. You've got the lactic acid, you have to sit down and rest. And you have to sit down and rest, and your brain has to be able to get rid of the build-up of all of those toxins. Hence that really crass image with lots of women doing the cleaning. I'm now know I should get rid of it. I'll do it again. I think there's a non-binary here. Just saying. Right, then of course, last couple of minutes on drugs, because we do like drugs. So this is for business and students, actually. You guys are probably dopamine guys. You're probably not very serotonin. Serotonin for me is the happy here and now drug. It's the bit that enables you to sit in the moment. Sit in the moment and just take in the moment. It's a here and now drug. And it's really nice. It's lovely. It gives you that nice thing. You're feeling comfortable, you're feeling calm. It also allows you to learn stuff actually. If I said to you 5 times, I've done it 5 times yet, temple. I think I probably have said it 5 times now. And when you've done it in a very supportive, nice environment like this, you will have made a big connection. You'll turn on the genes in your brain that will allow you to lay down proteins that will allow you to form this new connection. Because of the serotonin will turn on 5 times. Really clever. And it's a lovely drug, but it's not dopamine. Here and now, dopamine is motivated. Dopamine is the future drug. It's the drug of most successful people. It's the drug that means most successful people aren't ever able to sit down and just take in the moment. They are constantly driven to look for something new, constantly. They are constantly driven by dopamine, which is saying, don't want to sit in the moment, you don't want to sit in the moment, you need to figure out what's going to happen. You like the chase. You like chasing the partner you don't like having sex with. You like having the chase more than you like having sex. Because sex is the moment. Sex is serotonin. The chase is dopamine. And quite often in business, too much dopamine, not enough serotonin. Too many driven people that want to make change. Sometimes I fault our parliamentary system, which is just over the way there. Because Parliament draws people to it because they want to make change. When sometimes change isn't necessary. Sometimes you should just sit and enjoy what you have. Politicians, if you measure their dopamine pathways, they have huge quantities of the dopamine pathway and not enough of the serotonin pathway. If you look at creative people, they have huge quantities of the dopamine pathway and not enough of the serotonin pathway. If you look at captains of industry, they're constantly striving to change things, constantly moving forward. Rarely are they able to sit and enjoy the thing that's actually happened, their success, their achievement, their family, etc., etc. These people, they get divorced 6 times more likely to get divorced or have affairs or have relationships than these people. These people are your progressives, your liberals, your people that see humanity as being important, but humans as not being quite so important. These people, strangely enough, are your conservatives. These people are your reactionary people, but the people that are living for the humans. They like the little community around them. They're living in the moment. They're not looking at making these big, significant changes. Students love this stuff. Love this stuff. I call it the oh shit drug. And it's the oh shit drug because it's that moment when, as a 6-year-old, I was crossing the road and a lorry nearly knocked me over. I turned on the crossing and went, oh shit, I'm going to die. To the oh shit, I can see it's not over there, it's over there with my wife. Sue was at Wimbledon and she walked in and I thought, shit, you're gorgeous, I'm going to marry you. It's the drug that enables you to really vividly remember something as well, and you love it. Now the problem in business is that dopamine lasts instantly and it's brilliant. And then you have the reward again and dopamine levels go down. And then you have the reward again and dopamine levels go down. And then you have the same reward again and dopamine levels go down. This drug works because it's unpredictable. This drug is what makes teenagers really enjoy video games. It's what makes gamblers really enjoy gambling. It has to be randomized. If it's not, if it's consistent, if it's obvious, it loses its impact. It loses its impact. It's a very interesting drug. And I can do a whole new speech talk on that. You probably have enough. And serotonin, another fantastic drug. Anyway. The other one that's brilliant, women have this, oxytocin. Men have vasopressin, which is similar to oxytocin. Oxytocin is that bonding thing. It's that bit where if you give you a spud, yes, physically, you produce some oxytocin. I have, we're better connected now. Nothing you can do about it, nothing I can do about it. We are just better connected. Any opportunity to get asked for them there because they're British people, and they do a lot of hugging. Their teamwork works through hugging. This is the drug that women produce when they're having babies. and they are willing to have this parasite inside them for 9 months. 9 months. And then the pain and suffering, getting the thing out, like a melon coming out of a very small hole. And out it comes because of this amazing drop. And then when it comes out and covered in blood, and it looks like an ugly version of Winston Churchill. And when they look at it, they go, oh my God, you're the most beautiful thing that's ever existed. Men do it, but we don't produce as much oxytocin. We produce vasopressin, which is a slightly different version of that, but nonetheless it gives us that ability to bond. Brilliant for business, brilliant for students downstairs. Not much hugging, but certainly high-fiving, certainly slugging Sarah and Callum. Right, I think you've heard enough from me. Thank you very much. You've got some time for questions. Although there's very good. I have got more, but there's probably too much.
Well, thank you so much, Jeremy. That's amazing.
It wasn't whistle stop. Stop.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yes. So you spoke a bit about pruning, or passive. Yeah. So you spoke a bit about pruning, and there's sort of like the long-term pruning of certain parts, and then there's kind of like the short-term, i.e., like the temporal, etc. Has that got anything to do with calcification of certain sections of the brain at all?
Yeah, for me, it's one of the really interesting areas of research now, the importance of pruning, when pruning happens, and who gets pruned and who doesn't. So your birth and the environment that you're brought up in has a huge impact on